Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to April's update for ENSO. So we're going to have a look at what's happening in the equatorial Pacific. We'll see where we are right now in terms of those sea surface temperature anomalies in the Pacific Ocean. We'll have a look at how things have developed over the past month since we did the March update. And of course, we'll also have a look at some long-range models to see how things are forecast to go. So, this is the second video today, of course. The first video was the weekend forecast, as always on a Saturday, having a detailed look at the weather for the week ahead. If you want to know what's going to be happening for this week's weather, check out the video which is on the homepage. There's also the written version. You get to that via a button at the top of the page. Just click the button that says written centre and it'll take you to another page where you can get to the weekend forecast from there. Going to be easterly winds coming up this week, and I'll let you see weekend forecast to find out more about that. So I'm going to start off, just see what's happened really over the past month or so, and finding out where we are right now in terms of the ENSO region. So we're going to start off with the cold and warm episodes by season chart, just to see what's happened. This shows every ENSO event on a tri-monthly basis going right way back to 1950. This is from NCEP and No. You can find the link to this website on the links page. So we come down to 2017. That's where we are for this year, and we see we are back to ENSO neutral condition now. So if we look at 2016, we can see that the first half of the year had that super Nino, massive El Nino event taking place, and then that rapidly faded away through the summer of 2016, and then of course we went into this very, very weak La Nina cold event. It's a borderline ENSO neutral to just about managing to get into La Nina territory. Probably one of the weakest La Ninas that have been recorded. The latest is that we are back to ENSO neutral conditions. So this is the first tri-monthly period for 2017, came out at minus 0.4. And then the second tri-monthly period, the one just gone, that's come out at minus 0.2. So quite clearly, we are very rapidly going back from what was a very weak landing. Anyway, we're going back into ENSO neutral condition. Let's see how things have developed in the equatorial Pacific Ocean over the past month. So the area we're specifically interested in is just here. We've got Peru just there and Indonesia over there. And then the area in between, that's the equator. And these ENSO events take place along the equator of the Pacific Ocean. So this is how things were looking when we did the March update. This is from the 23rd of March 2017. You see that we had still just about the signature of that really, really weak La Nina, which was rapidly fading away through the central and western part of the equatorial Pacific. And then we got this warm water sort of gathering over towards Peru. Now what happened is that through the early part of the year, January and February, we did see a rapid warming taking place in the eastern equatorial Pacific Ocean, in this region just here. And when we did last month's update, we could see that from sort of February to March, there has been quite a stall actually in the warm waters gathering in terms of obviously temperature anomalies in the eastern equatorial Pacific. So last month, a little bit of a stall had taken place in the warming that had rapidly started to occur in January and February of this year. Let's have a look at the very latest then, and this is it. This is how things are looking in the equatorial Pacific Ocean as of the 27th of April. So we can see that the final signature of La Nina of the cold event is pretty much gone now. That's gone. Those blue colours have disappeared over. Excuse me. Over here in the eastern part of the equatorial Pacific, we see that actually very little warming has taken place again over the past month. So if we go back to see how things were looking in March, that's how things were looking in March, this is how things are looking now. Hasn't really been much progress made with the onset of a warm event with the onset of El Nino. Now, it is still quite significantly warmer than average through this eastern part of the equatorial Pacific Ocean, and this may well be taking us in towards an El Nino event by the summer, but certainly things have slowed up in terms of the development of this compared to what we were seeing during January and February. Interestingly, the northern Pacific Ocean is quite cold now up there in the northern Pacific Ocean, and that's in contrast to what we saw around this time in 2015. This is when the Super Nino was beginning to get itself going during the early and middle phase of 2015. And you notice how much warmer the northern equatorial Pacific Ocean was in 2015. So by this point in 2015, we're already seeing a fairly reasonable signature for El Nino there along the equatorial Pacific Ocean. If we go back to the latest, April 2017, you see it's significantly colder up in the north, which is one of the things that might be slowing down the development of El Nino. So we may go into an El Nino this summer. I wouldn't be surprised if we do, but I would suspect it's unlikely to really take off and go into Super Nino territory, such as we did a couple of years ago. Now, one of the things we can look at to perhaps see where things might go in the coming weeks is the subsurface temperature anomalies. So these charts are just showing us the surface temperature anomalies of the oceans, but this chart shows us what's happening at depth, going quite a long way down into the depths of the very deep, of course, Pacific Ocean. So up here we've got kind of like the surface temperatures up there. They're like the sea surface temperature anomalies. But down here, this is going down into depth, and you see at depth we have got two areas that are really looking really quite warm. So we've got this area just here, quite a long way down, that has a lot of warm water, and also interestingly over here, over on the eastern side of the equatorial Pacific. Keep in mind that this kind of is where Peru would be, and over here is where Indonesia would be. So the same idea as the charts that we were just looking at. So we've got two areas of quite warm subsurface temperature anomalies, and when it's a little bit colder through this central area just here. But looking at those subsurface temperature anomalies, I do think that we probably are going to be going into El Nino condition through the course of this year. I just don't see it really taking off into a Super Nino at this point. I think it'll be an event that's significantly weaker compared to the very enormous, possibly record-breaking El Nino event that occurred a couple of years ago. One of the things we look at is the SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index. This is an index that's reflecting the state of the atmosphere in the southern Pacific Ocean, measuring the air pressures between Darwin in Australia and Tahiti in the central sort of tropical Pacific Ocean, South Pacific if you like. So when the SOI is negative, it tells you that the atmospheric setup in the Southern Ocean is reflecting an El Nino state. When the SOI is positive, it's telling you that the atmosphere is reflecting a La Nina type state. So remember, it's always the atmosphere, it's always the weather that's driving the index. It's not the other way around. It's the same with any of the indexes that we use for weather, whether it's the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation, QBO, MJO, whatever it is, and this one is included in that. The SOI is always the weather that drives the index. It's not the index driving the weather. So at the start of April, we was actually getting some quite negative numbers of the SOI, -7, -10, -14, -4, -3. Telling us that in early April, the atmosphere in the Southern Ocean was kind of reflective of a reasonably weak El Nino type condition. However, we did then go quite strongly positive for a while around the 10th and the 11th of April, the SOI went to plus 19 and plus 15 and plus 10. And this tells us that on those days, the atmosphere in the Southern Ocean was more reflective of a La Nina type setup. And then we've got some very intense negativity indeed. As we scroll further down, we find the numbers going really negative. So, for example, on the 14th of April, we go down to minus 34. On the 15th, we go down minus 34 again. On the 16th, we go down to minus 35, 17th minus 30, 18th minus 17. These numbers are very strongly reflective of El Nino, of an atmospheric setup that is very strongly indicative of El Nino in the Southern Ocean. And to get these events going, what has to happen is that you have to get the atmosphere, and we can see if the atmosphere is doing it by looking at the SOI. We have to get the atmosphere coupling up with the ocean. We know that at depth we have got quite a bit of warm water in the subsurface part of the Pacific Ocean waiting to be pushed up, but to do that we've got to get the atmosphere together with the ocean, and then we can start getting the event going. And on those days, that was happening. 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th of April, the atmosphere was reflective of El Nino, and we would have had warming occurring, I think, through the equatorial Pacific Ocean on the surface in those days. However, that's not really bedded in yet, so we come down to the latest numbers, and we have, for example, 24th of April, still quite negative at minus 11, but on the 26th, we go positive to plus 14, on the 27th, we go stay positive at plus 18. The very latest, the 28th, is sort of neutral, really, 0.65. So we're not seeing the SOI moving into a pronounced negative phase at the moment. We're sort of trading negative and positive numbers, which means while we do this, El Nino will struggle to get going, because on some days, these days, for example, 26th, 27th of April, the atmosphere is fighting against what the ocean is trying to do and what's going to happen. So we've got to have several weeks of consistently negative numbers with the SOI, which will tell us we've got several weeks of the atmosphere reflecting El Nino. When we get that, the atmosphere then will couple up with the ocean, they'll hook up and will start to generate this El Nino event. Whilst we're trading positive and negative SOI numbers, it can be very difficult to get the El Nino really bedded in. But it's very early days on this. You don't really get these events going, whether they're El Nino or La Nina, you don't really get them going until around June, July. That's when they tend to start, and then they strengthen through the rest of the year. So April is not a month anyway where you'll be expecting to see an El Nino really getting going. Of course, it did in 2015, but the Pacific Ocean was in a very unusual state in 2015. Let's just finish off having a look at some models, and we're going to start off with the CFS V2. So this is what CFS is forecasting. Now, this has been sort of downgraded a little bit in terms of its ENSO forecast. A couple of months ago, it was going for a proper sort of El Nino event, moderate El Nino event, going into that sort of territory. Now you notice that the black dash line has been pegged down. So this is where we are right now. We're just into sort of just about into El Nino type condition. To get El Nino, you need to go above 0.5 degrees or more above average. So you need to go up into that sort of zone on these charts. You have to do it over 5 tri-monthly periods as well. So it looks like the model wants to keep us sort of on a borderline between ENSO neutral. ENSO neutral is anything from there down to there. Wants to keep us on a borderline between ENSO neutral and just about, but my word, it's a close thing, just about into El Nino territory. And that is where the model is pretty much keeping things flatlining, to be honest, throughout the year. We can go to January 2018 over there. So definitely the CFS V2 has weakened this El Nino signal. It's not going for a moderate El Nino now. It is seeing, well, it barely makes it to El Nino territory, actually. It's just on the border between El Nino and ENSO neutrals, albeit ENSO neutral on the warmer side. Of course, this is what happened last year when we was on the border between ENSO neutral and La Nina, this phase just here. So it's seeing that again, really, for this year, for 2017, very similar to 2016. The only difference is that last year was on the colder side, on the La Nina side of neutral. This year, we're forecasting, anyway, to be on the El Nino side of neutral. What about the ECMWF? Well, that's perhaps going for slightly more of an El Nino signal. So this, again, is where we start, where we are right now, where we're starting off from. So the ENSO plume of the ECMWF model looks like it's more or less in El Nino territory, sort of solidly moderate El Nino territory. So, again, these are the temperature anomalies that we have on the side, and the dates are on the bottom. ENSO neutral really is anything from there down to there, and that's roughly, broadly, that sort of area where the CFS V2 is having things. You notice with the ECMWF, that's probably on the colder side. Actually, the model, the ensemble plume of the model is more in that sort of zone just there. Now, these Super Nino ensemble members are outliers, quite clearly. There's a few, actually, that are also outliers on the colder side. But I think this sort of area here is pretty much where the ECMWF is, maybe a little bit higher than that, perhaps around there as we're going through to the second half of the year. So it looks like it is more in towards El Nino territory, albeit again it's only a weak to moderate El Nino. It's not really seeing a Super Nino. It's not taking the ensemble plume into that sort of territory at this stage. Nevertheless, a little bit more bullish in terms of going into an El Nino from the ECMWF compared to CFS V2. And then, quite interestingly, Jamstech is really starting to ramp up the, so just as we think perhaps got a bit of a trend, Jamstech is really starting to ramp up this El Nino event. So again, this is where we are right now with the sea surface temperature anomalies in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. The red line here is the trend of the model. It's the ensemble mean, and you see that very rapidly it is lifting that red line upwards, so that by the time you go through to around October, we're there, which is moderate El Nino territory, and by the time you get through to the end of the year, when it's reaching its peak, of course, around Christmas, it is actually going to 2 degrees above average, which is a strong El Nino. It's not going to Super Nino, which will be somewhere up here. That's around where we was, that area there, around where we was in 2015, 2016. It's not going up to that, but Jamstech is definitely going for a bigger El Nino event, particularly compared to the CFS V2, which barely gets to an El Nino at all, and even compared to ECMWF, which is more along the lines of a weak to moderate El Nino. That is a strong El Nino that the Jamstech model is going for. So the modelling is a little bit uncertain, actually, this month. Looks like we're either going to be sort of having a weak borderline ENSO neutral event on the warmer side, or we're going to go up into a moderate El Nino event. I think the Jamstech might be a bit over the top there, trying to take things into a strong El Nino event. Be surprised if that's how things go. But I say it's very early days for this, either way, and we will know a good deal more as we get through past the spring predictability barrier, which we'll get past in June. So not long to wait now before we can start to lock in exactly where this is going. So it looks like we're still going into El Nino, but I think the Jamstech is a bit over the top at this stage. I'd suggest, again, something more along the lines of the ECMWF, which is, again, weak to moderate El Nino. The CFS V2 has probably pulled things down a little bit too much. So let's say the ECMWF is in the middle of the CFS, which is probably a little bit too cool, and the Jamstech, which is probably a little bit too warm. ECMWF looks like it could be the way forward, which is a weak to moderate El Nino through the summer and into second half of the year. Right, check out Weekend Forecast if you haven't yet done so. We'll have another look at ENSO next month in May, of course, as always. And tomorrow at Gaz Office, we're going to have a Gaz Office Sunday Roundup. We'll also have the second seasonal model roundup for the summer. So you're going to get around 9, 10, 11 long-range models together, see what they're all showing for this summer. That'll be kicking things off tomorrow at Gaz Office around 10 a.m. and then later on we'll have that Sunday roundup as always. Right, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.